Have you ever paused and wondered why Buddhism, one of the most ancient, respected, and deeply philosophical spiritual traditions in the world, does not place a creator God at the center of its teachings? But before you decide what that means, let me ask you something. What if one of the most enlightened minds in human history intentionally chose not to answer the question of God? What if the silence itself holds a deeper truth, one that could completely change how you see life, suffering, and even yourself? Stay with me, because by the end of this exploration, you may not just understand Buddhism better, you may begin to understand your own mind in a way you never have before. For many of us, the idea of God is deeply woven into our understanding of life, morality, and purpose. God is often seen as the creator of the universe, the source of justice, and the ultimate refuge in times of uncertainty. So when we encounter a path like Buddhism which seems to step away from this concept, it can feel puzzling, even contradictory. But what if this difference is not a rejection, but a redirection? What if the Buddha was not trying to deny the existence of God, but instead guiding us toward a different kind of inquiry, one that begins not in the heavens but within our own experience? Over 2,500 years ago, Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, set out on a quest that was not about discovering who created the world, but about understanding something far more immediate and universal: human suffering. Why do we suffer? Can suffering truly end? And if so, how? His insights, preserved in ancient texts like the Pali Canon, offer a path that is practical, experiential, and deeply introspective. In this video, I invite you to explore this perspective with an open and calm mind. There is no intention here to challenge your beliefs, but rather to expand your understanding. Think of this not as a debate, but as a quiet conversation, one seeker speaking to another. Because sometimes the answers we seek are not found in believing, but in seeing clearly. Before we try to understand why Buddhists do not center their belief around a creator God, it is essential to gently step into what the Buddha actually taught. Without this foundation, it is easy to misunderstand Buddhism as simply non-theistic, when in reality, it is something far more profound and experiential. Siddhartha Gautama, who later came to be known as the Buddha, never presented himself as a divine figure, a prophet, or a messenger of any higher power. Instead, he described himself as someone who had awakened, someone who saw reality as it truly is. His role was not to demand belief, but to offer guidance based on direct insight. His teachings, carefully preserved in collections such as the Tripitaka or Pali Canon, revolve around a central and deeply human concern: suffering or dukkha. Rather than beginning with questions about the origin of the universe, the Buddha began with a simple observation: life as we experience it often contains dissatisfaction, stress, and impermanence. From this observation, he articulated the Four Noble Truths: that suffering exists, that it has causes, that it can end, and that there is a path leading to its cessation. This path, known as the Eightfold Path, is not a set of commandments, but a practical guide to living with wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. What is important to notice here is the direction of his teaching. The Buddha did not emphasize belief in a creator or reliance on divine authority. Instead, he emphasized understanding, awareness, and personal transformation. In this sense, Buddhism is less about believing in something unseen, and more about seeing clearly what is already present within your own experience. It invites you not to accept blindly, but to observe, reflect, and realize truth for yourself. As we continue this exploration, one of the most intriguing aspects of the Buddha's teaching emerges: not what he said, but what he chose not to say. During his lifetime, the Buddha was often approached with profound philosophical questions. Is the universe eternal or not? Does a creator God exist? What happens to the enlightened one after death? Surprisingly, in many of these instances, the Buddha remained silent. This silence was not due to ignorance, nor was it an avoidance of truth. Rather, it was a deeply intentional and compassionate choice. In texts such as the Kamalankiyavada Sutta, the Buddha offers a powerful analogy. He speaks of a man struck by a poisoned arrow who refuses treatment until he knows every detail about the arrow: who shot it, what it was made of, and from where it came. The Buddha gently points out that such a man would die before receiving his answers. In the same way, the Buddha taught that human suffering is immediate and urgent. We experience stress, dissatisfaction, fear, and attachment here and now. And yet, we often become absorbed in abstract questions that, while intellectually fascinating, do not directly lead to the end of suffering. For the Buddha, The purpose of spiritual practice was not to construct a perfect worldview, but to bring about liberation. If a question did not contribute to this goal, he set it aside, not as unimportant but as unhelpful for the path. This approach invites us to reflect on our own seeking. Are we searching for answers that comfort the mind, or for insights that transform our experience? In this silence there is not emptiness, but direction. A quiet guidance, leading us back to what truly matters, understanding suffering and discovering the way beyond it. As we move deeper into the Buddhist teachings, we begin to encounter one of the most profound and transformative principles in Buddhism, dependent origination or Pratītyasamutpāda. This teaching offers a radically different way of understanding existence, one that does not rely on a single creator or an absolute beginning. At its heart, dependent origination means this: all phenomena arise in dependence upon causes and conditions. Nothing exists independently. Nothing stands alone. Everything that comes into being does so because of a network of interconnected factors. The Buddha expressed this simply: when this exists, that arises. When this ceases, that ceases. This principle is explained in detail throughout the Pali Canon, particularly in teachings like the Samyutta Nikaya, where the Buddha outlines the chain of causes that lead to suffering, often referred to as the 12 links of dependent origination. For example, consider something as simple as a tree. It does not appear out of nowhere. It depends on a seed, soil, water, sunlight, air, and time. Remove any of these conditions and the tree cannot exist in the same way. In the same manner, our thoughts, emotions, and even our sense of identity arise from conditions, past experiences, perceptions, habits, and environment. Within this framework, the question of a single, independent creator becomes less central. Not because it is denied outright, but because reality itself is seen as a continuous, interdependent process rather than a one-time creation. This insight gently shifts our perspective. Instead of asking, "Who created this?" we begin to ask, "What conditions give rise to this experience?" And in that question lies a powerful possibility, because if suffering arises due to conditions, then by understanding and transforming those conditions, suffering too can come to an end. As we continue this journey into the Buddha's wisdom, we arrive at one of his most subtle and transformative teachings, the doctrine of Anatta or non-self. This concept challenges one of our deepest assumptions, the idea that there is a permanent, unchanging I at the center of our experience. In everyday life, it feels natural to say, "This is me," or "This is mine." We identify with our body, our thoughts, our emotions, and our memories. These seem to form a stable identity, something solid and continuous. But the Buddha invited us to look more closely. In discourses such as the Anatta Sutta, he explained that what we call the self is actually a collection of 5 constantly changing aggregates, skandhas. Form: the body, sensation, feelings, perception, mental formations, thoughts, habits, consciousness. Each of these is in a state of continuous change. Our body ages, our thoughts shift, our emotions rise and fall. If everything we identify with is changing, then where is the permanent self? The Buddha did not say that we do not exist at all. Rather, he pointed out that what we consider a fixed identity is, in reality, a dynamic process, a flow rather than a solid entity. This insight has profound implications. In many religious traditions, the idea of a creator God is closely linked to the creation of an eternal soul. But in Buddhism, since there is no unchanging self, the need for such a framework becomes less relevant. More importantly, understanding non-self is not merely a philosophical idea, it is a practical realization. When we stop clinging to a fixed identity, we begin to loosen our attachments, our fears, and our suffering. And in that letting go, there is a quiet freedom, a sense of lightness that arises not from believing in something, but from seeing clearly what we are not. At this point you might be wondering, does Buddhism completely deny the existence of gods? The answer is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. In many Buddhist texts, particularly within the Daya Nikaya and Anguttara Nikaya, there are clear references to beings known as devas, often translated as gods or celestial beings. These beings are described as living in higher realms, possessing great power, long lifespans, and refined states of existence. However, the key distinction lies here. These gods are not creators and they are not eternal. Unlike the concept of an all-powerful, all-knowing creator God found in many other traditions, Devas in Buddhism are still part of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. They too are subject to impermanence, anicca, and eventually their existence in these higher realms comes to an end. In some discourses, the Buddha even describes situations where certain gods mistakenly believe themselves to be creators, simply because they were among the first beings to arise in a particular cosmic cycle. Yet, they too are bound by ignorance and limitation. This perspective gently reshapes the role of divine beings. While they may exist and even be worthy of respect, they are not the ultimate source of truth or liberation. In Buddhism, the highest refuge is not found in a god, but in the Buddha, the awakened one, the Dhamma, the teaching, the Sangha, the community of practitioners. These are known as the triple gem. So rather than seeking salvation through divine intervention, Buddhism encourages a different approach, one rooted in understanding, practice, and inner transformation. In this way, the presence of gods is acknowledged, but the path to freedom remains firmly in your own hands. As we come to the heart of the Buddhist teaching, we encounter a message that is both deeply empowering and profoundly personal. The path to liberation lies within you. Throughout his life, the Buddha consistently guided people away from dependence on external authority and toward direct personal understanding. One of his most well-known instructions, found in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, is this: be a lamp unto yourself, Atta Dipabhava. This was not a call for isolation, but an invitation to cultivate inner clarity and self-reliance. The Buddha encouraged his followers not to accept teachings blindly, even his own, but to examine them through experience, reflection, and mindful awareness. In Buddhism, transformation does not come from belief alone. It arises through practice. This practice is often expressed through three essential trainings: ethical conduct, sila, living with integrity and compassion; mental discipline, samadhi, cultivating focus and stability through meditation; wisdom, panna, seeing reality clearly as it truly is. Together, these form the foundation of the path toward awakening. What makes this approach unique is its emphasis on responsibility. No external force can purify your mind for you. No divine being can remove your suffering on your behalf. The process is gradual, personal, and deeply transformative. And yet, this is not a burden, it is a profound freedom. Because if suffering is created through causes and conditions within our own minds, then it can also be understood, softened, and eventually brought to an end through our own awareness. In this light, Buddhism does not ask you to place your faith in something distant or unseen. Instead, it gently invites you to turn inward, to observe, to understand, and to awaken. And perhaps, in that quiet turning, you begin to discover that what you were seeking has always been closer than you imagined. As we gently come to the end of this exploration, let us take a moment to reflect on what we have uncovered together. The question we began with, why don't Buddhists believe in God? May now feel a little different. Not necessarily answered in a simple yes or no, but understood in a deeper and more meaningful way. Buddhism does not center its path around a creator God, not out of rejection but out of a different priority. The Buddha's concern was not to define the beginning of the universe, but to illuminate the nature of human suffering and the possibility of freedom from it. Through teachings like the Four Noble Truths, dependent origination, and non-self, we are invited to look closely at our own experience, to understand how our thoughts, attachments, and perceptions shape the way we live and feel. Rather than asking us to place our trust in an external power, the Buddha gently encourages us to cultivate awareness, wisdom, and compassion within ourselves. And perhaps this is where the true beauty of this path lies. It does not demand belief. It invites investigation. It does not promise salvation from outside. It points toward awakening from within. So as you leave this video, you may not need to arrive at a final conclusion. Instead, you might carry a quieter question with you. What does it mean for me to truly understand my own mind? Because in that inquiry, there is something deeply transformative, something that goes beyond concepts of belief or disbelief. If this exploration resonated with you, you are most welcome to continue this journey. There is always more to discover, not just in teachings but in your own direct experience. Thank you for spending this time in reflection. Until we meet again, may you remain mindful, curious, and gently aware of each moment as it unfolds.